So, as always, we'll start with a centering meditation. And I think what's valuable to really consider is that it doesn't matter what we're birthing, whether we're birthing a baby, whether we're supporting somebody to birth a baby, whether we are birthing a project that is very close to our hearts and feels like our baby on some kind of a soul level. The state of experience that we should be in, or that is most beneficial for all of these types of birthing, is the place of coming back to being in our center in the simplicity of the moment. So it's not complicated, it's not tricky, it's not difficult. It's very, very, very simple and really rather sweet. You know, if I listen to people who have spent their lives really involved in this idea of how do you get to this place of expanded consciousness and so on. Their instructions usually come back to something very simple indeed. So, for instance, the Dalai Lama, one of his quotes that has stuck with me so deeply all these years is that he said, "My religion is kindness." Just that, you know, nothing more than that. And um, and then I think of Mary Oliver, who we all know. This is a quote that I think most of you will have heard before, but that thing that she says where you don't have to walk 100 miles through the desert on your knees repenting. You need only let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. It's the same thing as just being kind and simple. And Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a very well-known Buddhist meditation teacher, um, one of the things that he said is like this idea that we coming to enlightenment or something is as simple as drinking a cup of tea with pure enjoyment and pure presence. It's just simply taking a moment to really fully immerse yourself in that experience of drinking the cup of tea or being in this webinar or birthing a baby or supporting somebody to birth a baby or birthing a project. It's all the same thing. And so what we're going to do now is come back to that simplicity in the centering exercise. So I invite you to close your eyes if you wish. You're welcome to leave them open and just gazing with a soft gaze downwards if you prefer. And breathe deeply into this body, the soft animal of this body that loves what it loves. And take a moment to soften into the preciousness of that. That it's not difficult. It's very, very simple. It's very gentle. It's tender. And it's quiet. And the way that we immerse ourselves in the experience of being with the soft animal of this body is to allow all the extraneous stuff that takes us away from this experience to simply drop away. So, like watching the thoughts be like clouds in the sky that are passing by. There's no pushing them away, there's just simply allowing them to be there without being carried off out of this moment. And so as you breathe all the way down into your bellies, feel this quality of coming home into the soft animal body. And as you breathe out, really relax your tension, soften your awareness, and allow the feeling of the breathing out to carry through the muscles and the bones and the blood vessels of the body in a way that they just open up to receive the experience of being witnessed. So you're breathing fully and deeply. And at the same time, there's that part of you that is often distracted, that is simply present, witnessing this soft animal body, breathing, sitting, and being immersed in the sensory experience of being human in a human body. The sounds, the smells, the taste, the feeling of the air on your skin, and your clothing, and the weight of your body resting on your sit bones. And then I'm just going to sit in silence for a short while. So there's no interrupting the experience of simply being present to your breathing slowly and easily in this body that loves what it loves. Just following your breathing. Softening into everything that is here right now, which includes the discomforts and all the things that this body doesn't necessarily love. Holding it all gently and kindly. And then taking another deep breath in, and when you're ready, coming back to the room and open your eyes. Okay. So sometimes when there are more people in the group, we just move straight into chatting with the guest and so on. But we're such a lovely, intimate little group here today that I would love for us just to take a moment for everybody just to say hi, uh, and maybe just take like 30 seconds to a minute to tell me something or tell us something about what it is in your body that loves what it loves, because there's something very close and very connected to soul purpose when we come back to that place of what is it that this little body loves. And then I'm going to introduce Louise properly. And then she will tell us more about uh, birthing our soul purpose and so on. So I think the easiest way that I've always done this is to go alphabetically, because then at least you can sort of feel where you are in the circle. So Elizabeth, uh, can we start with you?
Good evening, everyone. Lovely to see everyone here. The one thing that my body absolutely loves, well, it's not only one thing, there's a variety of things, but solitude is one of the things that I really love. Solitude, just the quietness of being just with myself and my body. I just enjoy that thoroughly. And the other thing that really feeds my soul is to be in nature. I live in a city in Johannesburg, so I don't really have access to wonderful forests and things like that. But I have a beautiful garden, and I'm always in the garden at least once a week with my hands in the soil, digging, doing things. So that really, really feeds my soul. So those are the things that I really, really love. And it just gives me such joy. And every time I've done that, I just come out on the other side, just feeling renewed, grounded, and just, it's exactly what my soul needs. It's amazing how these simple things can have such an effect on your body. And I love the sunshine too, the beautiful sunshine that we are fortunate to have. Today, I actually went and just sat outside in the last rays of the sun as the sun was setting, and it was just so magnificent just to sit outside in the fresh wind and that beautiful sunlight just for a few minutes. So those are the things that really feed my soul.
Thank you. Thank you. Al-Karim.
Good evening, everyone. Particularly, um, what brings my soul peace and happiness and joy is, I agree with Elizabeth, it's solitude. It's allowing myself to actually rest and be intentional about my resting. I feel as women, we tend to play at rest. We don't really focus on genuinely settling in our bodies and just slowing everything down. Um, and spending time with children, just being messy and dirty and playing, making mud cakes, and like that just makes me so happy. It just reminds me what it is all for. Yeah, I've got a bit of full moon flu today, so.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Louise, you know what? I'm just going to ask you to stop a moment, because I have this set up here in order to help with the recording. And I can see that my voice is being recorded, but when you talk, I don't see the dial kind of moving. Louise, you might know better than me. So do you think it is recording, or shall I just pull this out and just go back to the way we normally do it?
I've certainly got a recording signal on mine that's flashing on my Zoom, so it's telling me it's recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Wonderful. Yes, Louise. And then, of course, we'll do the whole kind of proper introduction.
That's okay, that's all good. So I'm very much with Elkarim. I love, my body loves being with my grandson and rolling and playing and just being. And yeah, my little animal body kind of, we have to climb and we have to do things. And sometimes I realize that my body's aging, in that play, but at the same time, it's so enjoyable. And I had to laugh when you were talking about the little noises of the animal body because my dog's lying next to me and she was making all these lovely little snuffling noises while we were talking. So, or rather while we were meditating. So yeah, also being with her, just stroking her and just being next to her. She's so relaxing. Yeah, it just sends me into a place of relaxation. That's me for the moment.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Martha.
Hi everyone. Like the one thing that gets me to relax, like when we're meditating, is just the thought of belonging with people around me. It gives me so much joy. The interaction, I get to long for the interactions, and whenever I get that, I feel fulfilled and happy, get joy, peace of mind. It's so refreshing from the long, hectic day. It's so fulfilling to me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so interesting that what so many of you have been talking about is so simple and so relational, actually. Louise's dog or Martha talking about kind of being around the people that are important and so on. And it's something that I have become so aware of because of living here in the UK on my own, is how incredibly fulfilling it is to be in community and be in relation with others. And even if we're only in relationship to ourselves, how do we come back into a place where the body still receives the kind of nurturing and nourishment that we would sometimes get from other people and so on. And so for me, I think I'm a really tactile person, and it's a lot for me about engaging with the feeling of things, and being kind to myself in a tactile kind of way. Yeah. Sophia.
Yeah, Sophia. Hmm.
Hello. Hi, how
Hello.
are you?
Good. Yeah.
Long
Yeah.
time.
A long time. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen these emails a good few times. I'm excited. Finally got to jump on.
fantastic.
And yeah, I resonate with a little bit about everyone, what everyone's saying with children, with animals. I recently just got a goat and a sheep, and they're just babies. So there's a lot of joy in just sitting with them and just watching them during the day, like climbing rocks and things like that. It just reminds me of how simple joy can be, and children as well, of just they just don't think about time or anything like that. They're just playing, and I absolutely love that as well. And I feel at the moment it's an interesting process. I recently moved to Venezuela, so I'm integrating into a new community. So I also resonate with Robyn there, of just like, okay, how do I continue nourishing myself in all the different ways that my soul needs and my body needs, because community is such a huge part of that. And one of the biggest things that's really giving my soul a lot of energy, my body a lot of energy right now, is planting a lot of food, planting a lot of seedlings, baby trees, because I just purchased a piece of land with my husband, so we're going all on the whole food forest craze right now. And yeah, that's giving my soul a lot of light and a lot of love. Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a real soul baby, doesn't it?
It is, yeah, it's a big one.
Tabata.
It's a hard one to be the last because I also I also resonate with everybody. But two things that also that popped up when you asked is the idea of everything that takes me out a little of the mind and go back to the body in the sense of gentle movements, for example, and even the simple act of listening and having presence with what is happening, how I'm feeling. It's also very, very nourishing. And of course, everything that you said, like everybody else, I also have a dog and it's just cuddling her. It's already such a joy, or being around people, or I'm also very touchy. Um, receiving a hug from someone you love, for example, is also very, very nourishing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do think that, some people are more visual, some are more oral, some are more kinesthetic. And I do think that kinesthetic people are, it's weird, often doulas and birth keepers, and not that they are often birth keepers are often very kinesthetic, put it that way around. Yeah. Okay. So now we come back to Louise. And so Louise is an accountant and and she's also done it's a really interesting kind of balance of who she is, because she has done an enormous amount of spiritual kind of work around becoming an Avalon priestess, and she does sea priestess trainings and takes people through all sorts of deep spiritual processes and so on, in order to access their intuitive knowing and sort of guide them in their paths that they take through life and so on. So she's this balance of being incredibly practical and really spiritual at the same time. And I know I've told loads of people the story before. Louise has heard it many times. But when I first got, by the way, I also just want to say that she spent how many years, Louise, in Australia doing the tree project?
Nearly 10 years. Yeah.
And so she was in charge of a very, very large NGO, NPO,
NGO, yeah.
NGO.
Yeah. I can talk a little bit about that. It's part of what I'm
Okay,
going to talk
you
about
you
today.
you
Yeah.
can anyway. It was like this whole save the planet kind of business that she was involved in on a really large scale, and it was tremendously successful when she was at the helm of it. And then she came back to the UK because she wanted to be close to her grandson, and then was brought into this job of running the Sacred Birth Centre in Glastonbury. Which in terms of like the largeness of the work that she's doing was probably a bit of a downgrade, but we're all very happy to have her there. And the story that I wanted to tell was that I think I'd been working at the Sacred Birth Centre for about maybe a week or something like that. And I had been given this job of updating the inventory in the shop that we have there. And most of the stuff was on, and then I had a whole lot more that I had to add and everything. And it's not my best thing doing that. And so I sort of found a ChatGPT hack that could help me to do it kind of more swiftly. I thought I was being very clever indeed. And I deleted the entire inventory. And and like totally deleted it, not just sort of deleted it, not just kind of like, oh, we can get it back, deleted it, like deleted it. And so then the amazing thing, the reason why I'm telling you the story is that Louise went, oh, okay, well, let's see what we can do about this. She didn't lose it at all. And she goes, Oh, okay. Well, I see that actually we haven't just lost the inventory, we've also lost all the sales that have happened up until now. So we have no way of actually kind of like figuring out, you know, who we still owe money to that is on consignment and what we've sold, and it's all gone kind of thing. And so I'll just work away at it a little bit. And so she worked away at it all day until 10 o'clock that night and finally got it working again at 10 o'clock in the evening. And she never once ever said to me, Robyn, that was a really stupid thing. Don't ever do that again. Or she didn't fire me. She didn't do anything. It was just perfectly calm and sweet and kind. And I went, you're a fine boss and you're welcome on my webinar around teaching people how to fulfill their soul purpose. So over to you, Louise.
I think probably in my career, much worse things have happened. I have to tell you a little thing. So back in the day, I worked in a very large corporate organization, and we were part of a sale process of which Citigroup were involved, and I'm talking hundreds of millions of pounds of this. And I accidentally told the other buyer the price that the other buyer had actually offered, which is like the worst thing you can possibly ever do in those circumstances. And I received something very similar, which was the head of Citigroup, who was leading the deal, said to me, "Oh well, it'll keep their pencil sharp, so they'll make sure that they put in the right number now." And he was so laid back about the whole thing, and I honestly thought I was going to be fired, left, right, and centre. So I've always remembered that, you know, that actually sometimes, yeah, things happen, you know, and you don't do them deliberately. You just things happen. And actually, I love what I love about Robyn is, you know, I think we both share something, which is kindness really matters. Actually, kindness is a way that we can, as individuals, really connect and be in relationship with others when we go back to that sense of loving kindness. And we were looking at the etymology of the word kindness, as it derives in the English, and it comes from kin. So it actually comes from relationship. So who you are in kin with, who is your kin, who are your people. And I really loved that as an etymology of that word. It was kind of a bit of a guess that it might come from that, but it turns out that it actually did. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about this evening is, sorry, my dog's scratching in the background. I hope you can't hear her too much. Is some of the practical ways in which we can find our purpose. And in a way, our purpose can change throughout our lives, of course. I've never been a believer that everyone's got one sole purpose. I think actually we have perhaps lots of different soul purposes and lots of things that we might want to birth into the world and projects that we might want to bring it to life. In the same way that as a mother, you may have more than one child, you know, you can have lots of different projects and lots of different things that you want to do. But one of the things that I do think is that there's some similarities in what conditions can help us to actually bring our projects and our passions to life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And also about what those conditions take from us as individuals in the way that we interact with others. So how do we create good conditions for others as well as ourselves to live into their passion and purpose? Because actually, if we're truly in relationship, then we are in reciprocity with each other. So one of my greatest teachers, as I'm sure for all of you, is nature. And you know, a strawberry or an oak tree or any plant doesn't have to think what it is. It knows what it is. It knows what it will become, and it lives into that becoming. And we're very unique as human beings in that we get a little bit of a choice as to what our becoming might look like. And so I think we can take some examples from nature as to how we can come into our own belonging as people, but also in that what makes that possible for nature is the right conditions. And I'm thinking of Sophia here with her piece of land and what she's going to be planting. And one of the things that you have to do in order to plant well is to actually have really good soil and really good preparation for what it is you're going to plant, and to think about what conditions might help you to grow the things that you're going to grow. So I think that's been a huge teacher for me in terms of my work. And as Robyn said, kind of played three roles in recent, after leaving corporate and deciding that I wanted to be in service to life. That was I came up with my passion and purpose, and it was, can I be in service to life? And if I can be in service to life, in what way can I be in service to life? And it's almost like the minute I told the universe that I wanted to do that, opportunities arose for me to put that into practice. And to begin with, I said no to a few of those because I didn't easily recognize them. And perhaps the conditions of my own belonging weren't quite, or my own becoming weren't quite ready at that point. But the first role that I played was a lady that I knew had created an organization based on the fact that she crashed her car into a tree and was told that after crashing her car into a tree that she should go out and reforest the tropics, which sounded like quite a big ask for somebody. And her name is Claire Dubois, and she started an organization called Tree Sisters. Many of you may have heard of Tree Sisters. They began around sort of about 2011 here in the UK, but they were a global organization that actually had women from all over the world give small amounts of money each month to help fund tropical reforestation. And as part of that, they would gather together at the full or the new moons and have a moon practice together. So it was about weaving themselves into nature as well as supporting nature through the donations that they had. And in that particular organization, my role was to actually practically make it happen in the background. So make sure that the money went to the right projects, and the projects that were actually being planted were genuinely planting trees. And so I really see, the reason I'm mentioning this is because in order for Claire's passion and her purpose in life to manifest, she needed support. So she needed people in her ecosystem who could provide the skills that she didn't necessarily have in order to bring that passion and purpose into a reality, into something that lived and breathed. And I was one of those people that provided my skills. So I came along with my skills, which were, managing to put together great spreadsheets that made sure that we knew how many trees had been planted, and we knew, which monies had gone to which project, and to make sure that those projects were audited and doing the things. But there were other people that brought their skills. So there were people who brought skills around marketing, and back in those days you could still raise lots of money on Facebook, and so that's what we did. We had lots of campaigns on Facebook to plant lots of trees. And that organization, when I finished and left that organization to go on to the next thing that was calling my passion and purpose, had planted over 30 million trees in the tropics, just from the small donations of women across, the US, Canada, South Africa, Australia, parts of Europe, all giving maybe £5, £10 a month to help grow those trees. And it really taught me that one of the conditions that you actually need for your passion and purpose to come into place is to have the right people around you with the right skills. And I think that might cross over quite well into the birthing world as well, because I think, in order for a birth to happen well, you need the right people with the right skills who understand the physiology of birth and understand what's kind of happening. And so as my condition number one, I think my condition number one to living your passion and purpose well is to find out who your team, because I know that no one's an island and no one can do everything on their own. We all need a support team around us to help bring our passions to life. And so I brought those skills. It resulted in some great things happening, but it was not me alone. It was a team of us all doing it. And obviously it was Claire who had that initial kind of, yeah, what is it that I want to bring into the world? And during that time I was living out in Australia, and I'd lived in Australia previously, many years before. This was kind of my second round. I think they call us boomerang poms. We kind of go in and out. And this is my second boomerang in, basically. And when I had lived in Australia the first time around, being a rather naive kind of pom, which I was at the time, I turned up and was, I suppose, glamoured into this. You can have this house which is in a village in a forest by the sea. I was taken in completely by the marketing, and we bought this 1/4 acre block in this very beautiful forest, which was very close to the sea. And I was in seventh heaven. You can imagine coming from a small sort of UK house, having trees in my garden, having this kind of acreage to roam around. And in those days, Australian properties are a little bit different now, but in those days, it was like 1/4 of the price of what I'd left behind in the UK. And so I was in my element until one morning I woke up to what I thought was an earthquake happening outside of my home. And it wasn't an earthquake, it was them actually clear felling the forest, because we were one of the early purchasers. And if you now I know lots about Australian development, I know what was going to happen. I know the story ending now, but I didn't know it then, which was they were going to clear fell the whole forest ready for putting blocks in and putting in houses that people would build. And so I can remember at the time just feeling utterly, I just didn't know what to do with myself, totally devastated by the destruction of these trees. But of course, that wasn't the conditions for my own becoming, and my own ability to plant trees in those days didn't exist. And this is what I said about opportunities and conditions. I just went back to my day job, which was working for Ford Motor Company in those days, and got over it and lived and went on to live another day. But it's something about that incident stuck in my mind. And when I'd worked with Tree Sisters, and when I came back to Australia for the second time, one of the things was really clear to me was I needed to do something for the Australian trees, not just the tropical trees. I needed to do something for the trees where I lived. And knowing that they were quite often at risk and had already been, clear felled, particularly in an area where I lived called the Wheat Belt. It's called the Western Australian Wheat Belt, and it was cleared for the agricultural production of wheat and sheep. And people were paid to clear large swathes of forest to do that. And it became really clear to me that my own passion and purpose that I had at that point in time was to actually do something that would be of benefit to the local place where I lived, and particularly in terms of the trees. And working for Tree Sisters at the time, I had this amazing job I really loved, and how could I birth that passion and purpose? Because I was already doing something for trees and I was doing it there, and it all seemed very, why did I want to change and do something different? But one of the things I know about the conditions of passion and purpose is that sometimes when something won't leave you alone, when it keeps nagging at you, when you can't put it down, that actually that is your passion and your purpose calling to you, because it won't let you put it down. And so I began a charity there, which was basically planting trees in the wheat belt of Western Australia. And we worked together with landowners there to actually put trees in the ground. And we planted over 8 million trees over a period of time.
Wow.
We also used to plant community forests as well, because one of the things we realized is that possibly a bit like South Africa and other places, the wheat belt is quite a long way out in your car. You actually have to drive for quite a few hours to get to it. And most of the people live in large, conurbations and suburbs within the city areas of Australia. They don't live in what is known as the outback, or even though it's quite not the outback, it's sort of the mid bit between the city and the outback. And so we built community forests because it was a place where people could actually get in touch with nature, and they could actually see trees in their own suburbs, and it would reduce the heat. Anyway, that's a long story just to say that part of the conditions that were required for me to do something was a feeling of belonging to that place, a feeling that I needed to do something for that place, and a passion and purpose that wouldn't actually let me alone. It wouldn't give me any chance to breathe. And I think sometimes many of us have dreams and passions that are callings that are trying to arrive for us, and we sometimes assume that if they're not manifesting, that we're doing something wrong. But often it's just that actually we need to begin. And we can begin in quite small ways to start off with. One of the things that I often say with everyone at the Sacred Birth Centre is, yes, we need conditions, but actually to begin, we just need to begin. Because in the beginning, sometimes we can create the conditions and the support that we need around us, because others then follow us in our passions. So one of the other conditions that arose through that was that there were others who shared that same dream. And so they came on board. They came on board with their donations. They came on board with their skills, in a bit the same way with the earlier story. People are then called into something because you begin. So one of the other conditions, I think, is that you have to have some kind of faith that your passion and purpose matters, particularly if it keeps calling at you, and then to begin. One of the other things that I think is really important for the conditions for things to be right, to begin and to start, is that it's good to have somebody to witness us. And you probably, really realize that in the birthing world as well. It's good to have witnesses, and it's good to have people who will support you as witness. They don't necessarily have to be completely aligned with what you're doing, or even necessarily taking part, but they witness you. And I was really fortunate in having a friend who eventually came on board and worked for the charity in the future. But at the beginning, she just bore witness to what it is I was trying to create. And she didn't interfere, and she didn't tell me what I needed to do. And she didn't, have lots of things that, well, you should do this and you shouldn't do this and you need that. She just sat there and listened to me talk about what it was I was doing, and just witnessed that in a very participatory way. So I think one of the conditions that can really help us with our passion and purpose is to have people who will provide that role for us, who will act as a witness. That's for me, that's one of the things that was probably most important during that time, because it actually allowed me to create and have someone who would just be there, just listen. And then, as Robyn said, in my most recent sort of birthing of something, because this is kind of my third birthing of these types of projects. Although I've birthed lots of different projects in the past, but this is the of the recent ones, is the Sacred Birth Centre in Glastonbury. And that was a condition that required me to have a sense of belonging. And I think that was one of the most, and for me, that's a really important condition, actually, is to feel a sense of belonging when you are becoming. So you're becoming something. And also, I think the other condition there was trust. So in this particular, the third story that I'm going to tell you today, so many years ago, in 2009, 2006 actually, I came to Glastonbury for the very first time, and came to something called the Goddess Conference, because I've always loved the feminine, and I've always loved the idea that the earth can be feminine and represent herself as feminine. So I always loved all of that sort of thing. And I managed to arrive at the Goddess Conference, and I had an amazing experience at the Goddess Conference, connecting with other women and feeling a sense of belonging, actually, feeling a sense that I'd finally found a sort of tribe of women that were thinking in a similar way to me. And as part of that, I signed up rather eagerly for a priestess training. And I was working in corporate at the time. That goes back to the Citibank kind of days. And it was strange. I was heading off down to Glastonbury at the weekends and holding ceremonies and doing priestessy things. And then in the week, I'd go back up, put on my rather dark black corporate suit, because that's what accountants wear. It's the only thing we're actually allowed to wear, I think. Well, it was in those days. And pretend to be somebody completely different. And I would not recommend that at all, because the splitting of yourselves into two halves is really not a recommended practice. But I did it for many, many years. And as part of that, though, I became part of a community of women that were offering things that were slightly different, in that they were offering things that were goddess related. They were offering rites of passage, they were offering land ceremony, and they were just offering a different way of being in the world, which really resonated for me. And I stepped away from that and did all the tree planting things and didn't live in the UK for a long time. But when I came back, the lady who had done the training, I met her for coffee, and she said, I've been given a donation to start a sacred birth centre, and I have absolutely no idea how to do that. And I've talked to lots of midwives and doulas, and they're very good at being midwives and doulas, but they're not really very good at starting charities or understanding what it needs to actually begin something. And so, would you like to do that for me? And if you can imagine, I'd literally just arrived back in the UK to be with my grandson, thinking that I was going to have a bit of a rest after planting 8 million trees, which physically I planted some of them. So I want to say I was a very active CEO, actually out on the land planting trees. But so initially I said, no, no, this is not me. I don't belong in the birth world. That's not my world. And she said, well, I think you might know a bit about birth, Louise. You might know a little bit about birthing things. And I said, well, I don't think it's probably for me. But anyway, I went away and did some research and promised that I would write a business plan so that whoever she chose to begin this project for her would have all of the information they needed. They'd have a nice little pack to begin and all of those kind of things. And I think she knew me a lot better than I knew myself, because obviously when I went away and started actually doing the research, I found that it was very similar work in a way, in that it needed people who understood that you need to build community to actually build a birth center. And I think I knew a little bit about community from the work that I'd done previously. But what I want to say about the conditions of this was that actually the conditions for me to do that was trust. So even though I was saying no, this individual trusted that I could bring what was needed to the organization, and I could bring some passion to the project, and I could bring it to life. And, if you were thinking about birth, I think one of the things that doulas and birth keepers bring is they trust that the woman can give birth, and they bring that sense of trust into the birthing room, and they understand that, a physiological birth is possible, and that a woman, under the right conditions can birth. And I think Kathy, who has understood also that if this project was to come to life, then she needed to trust, and she could trust me to be the one that can bring this to life. But I also want to say that what it needed in order for that trust to actually manifest into something was a community that was already gathering around the project. So had it been left to me on my own, all of the trust in the world wouldn't have started this project, because I wouldn't have known the things that I needed to do. But calling in the community and having a community that surrounded that project enabled it to actually birth, and to birth well. So I also want to say, when I look back at these sort of important moments, none of these emerged because I had everything figured out. In fact, it was the exact opposite in most cases. I didn't have any of it figured out. I didn't know why I wanted to do anything. They emerged because there were people, places, communities, and trust witnessing and holding that created the conditions for me to be able to step in and do the things that I do. So it's quite good as a leader. You get a lot of the kudos for doing the things, but actually it's the people around you that enable this to actually happen. And so if you're wanting to birth your passion and purpose, what we can offer each other, I think, is not necessarily advice, but actually a sense of belonging and a sense of all those things, a sense of witness, of trust, of support. And we can all help each other then to sort of birth our passions and our purpose in life if we do that. So hopefully that was of interest. And yeah, if you've got any questions, then I'd love to answer them. But just to say, I'm very happy that I'm in the birth world. I'm learning so much from it. And in the same way that nature's taught me a lot, so is the people in the birthing world as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise. That was really lovely to listen to. And you know, the thing that I was so aware of when you were talking was how, yes, you were the leader who created these amazing these amazing projects that made a difference in the world, are making differences in the world and so on. And yet, as you were talking it, and it wasn't so much when you were talking about the teams that you were working with in the communities and the support and the being witnessed that brought this home to me, but just this kind of sense of how it feels that something about our soul purpose is to do with an actual kind of vision that we might want to implement. And something about it is around a way of being, and that actually we can fulfill a soul purpose just by being who we are rather than necessarily creating a specific thing. And that how we do what we do is as important to the achievement of these soul purposes as what it is that we're actually doing as well. And you know, you were talking earlier about kindness being a hallmark for you of something that feels really kind of deeply important in terms of, I suppose, creating community and so on as well.
I think our sense of being, I mean, I think, you know, going back to the very first thing I said, I think we can all step into who we are as long as the conditions are right. And so I think that's so important. You know, it's one of the important things, I think, why education, you know, childhood welfare, all of those kind of things, giving people a good start in life and giving them the conditions in which they can thrive, because, you know, making good soil basically for humans as well as for plants.
Yeah.
Because then we can step into our being, who we
Yeah.
are, and do the things that we, you know, the things that call us and prompt us and keep us awake at night, because they are our kind of soul purpose that are calling to us.
Yeah. And even that analogy reminds me of Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks a lot about watering the good seeds. You know, that in our conscious awareness or something, we have seeds that are going to grow into something fruitful and seeds that might grow into thorny kind of pathways that are filled with brambles and not so easy to navigate. And it's just identifying which are the seeds that we want to water as well. It kind of leads back to that same thing. Elizabeth, you've turned your mute off. So is it something, would you like to join the conversation? Do you have something that you would like to add?
No, I think I just must have done it earlier without realizing.
No problem at all. So it's so lovely just to have such a small group actually, so that we can all kind of reflect on what this means to each of us individually, um, and 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 also to maybe check in around what is it that you feel that you need answered, or what are the questions that you have around birthing your soul purpose. And it might even be something like, I don't know what my soul purpose is. And just one thing I would like to say about that is that one of the ways to recognize our soul purpose or soul purposes, because as Louise says, we can have many children, is to feel into what is it that we're really passionate about, what is it that pulls us with longing. And then on the flip side of that same coin is where, what are the kind of biggest wounds that we've experienced in our lives? Because very often we have those particular experiences in order to lead us to a place where we uh, would like to turn that around to be its opposite somehow. If we have a deep soul purpose around anchoring love into the planet, we'll probably on some kind of deep soul level experience a wounding in terms of a lack of love, for instance, as an example. So one of the ways for us to identify our soul purposes is to look at that which we long for most, or that which has wounded us most. And both of them are often a very clear indicator of what it is that our soul is calling us towards. So what shall we do? How shall we? I think I'm just going to open it up to anybody, any of you, and then we can all just, make sure that we keep, well, there's two things. One is to ask the questions you want to ask, and the other is to allow for space to witness one another and so on, and what each of us have to say. Tabata.
My one is, I wouldn't start with a question. Synchronicities in life, right? I'm quite grateful to just be here. I wasn't sure about the topic, and it's the first time that I'm joining. So, and hearing your story, Louise, I'm like, oh wow, it was such an inspiration, because I also been working in more the corporate world for many years now. In a different sense, I do marketing, and I just quit my job after 6 years, and I'm in this transition phase during my 40s, that I'm actually taking an intentional pause, as they call it, right, to really understand what do I want to do next. And it's quite interesting because a lot of the things that I envision or that I would like to go towards to seem so far away that a lot of times I had no idea that you were accountant, for example. Many times in Glastonbury, I look of a lot of things that I'm passionate about, like herbalist, natural healing. And even if they are very dear to me because of the wounds, as Robyn was saying, they seem very far to just jump into them. So it is quite special and dear to my heart at this precise moment that I'm hearing from someone that, okay, we don't recommend, like some people, they are just in the soul purpose since the beginning, but that everything is possible in a way, so yeah, I'm truly, it wasn't a question, but for me, I'm really like, oh wow, how it's like perfect timing. So yeah.
I love that, Tabata, because I can remember, when I was in corporate for quite a few years, kind of living this, like I said, dual life, and really having this hope that, eventually I would find my passion and purpose. And I like having this almost like, I need to seek. But actually what I suppose it's, and what I was trying to kind of bring over, I'm not sure I did that so well, but is that actually it's following the conditions that arise and actions that arise from those conditions arising that was actually what led me to my passions and purpose. in a kind of way. It wasn't, although I had lots of dreams of things. I mean, part of this story is at one point when I first left corporate, I decided, a bit like you were just saying, I was going to become an art therapist. I decided absolutely that was for me. I was going to be the next art therapist. And so I went and took exams, and I studied to be an art therapist. And I was going to say it's probably the most expensive therapy anyone's ever undertaken, because it was obviously just purely for my own purpose. I never actually practiced as an art therapist because the conditions led me to a completely different path, which was to support Claire in her dream of Tree Sisters. So that's was the steps of conditions that just brought me into the places at the right time, because I was following what was my passion at the time, which was around trees, around being close to nature, taking part in some of those things, talking to people. So I was just following my passions. But it turned out, so the art therapy route was not the route for me, even though it seemed like a very good way to move from being an accountant to being an art therapist. But what I actually ended up doing, which was so much more rewarding in the end, was to use the skills I had as an accountant to actually support somebody else's passion and purpose in an area that I cared really deeply about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that that's the way for everybody, but I think it's about I really believe, quite honestly now, that your passion and purpose is supported by conditions that arise around you in order to enable you to take the next steps. Yeah. So
And
thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you.
the conditions that might just arise, Louise, is I might decide I need some art therapy. So brace yourself. um, who else would like to check in? Or
I'd love to ask a question. Yeah, I really resonate with what you're sharing, Louise, about the collaboration with people and having that support. And yeah, otherwise everything can just start to feel heavy, like it's not enjoyable, even though there's such excitement around it. And my question around that is, I have an understanding of like what kind of people I would like to have around in the project. I know there's like a synchronicity to it as well from a spiritual perspective, that people align at the perfect time and certain people have aligned in that way. But would you have any guidance about like how to connect with more people to support you on your mission, or did it just really happen very synchronistically for you?
I'm gonna say something here which might sound a bit controversial, but sometimes the first people that show up aren't the right people.
Yeah.
And then I think you know the right people, because the right people are actually, they are the people that don't ask for things from you, they bring things to you. So I like to think of them as sort of water carriers, really. They bring the water that you need, they bring the sustenance that you need, whereas sometimes the wrong people are wanting to take. They're not wanting to give, they're wanting to take. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't reciprocity in the giving and taking, and of course we're all giving and taking it at the same time. So I'm not suggesting for one moment that even with the people that are bringing things that there's not reciprocity there and they're not receiving, but they come to you with the right water at the right time. It's so interesting how that happens. So it's the skills that you might need, or the community that you might need in order to further what it is that the project needs. So rather than what you necessarily need. But I would also say as well, from a very spiritual perspective, sometimes people bring things that you need that you don't really want. So, but actually you need them really desperately. And they come along and they can often seem like people that, wow, did I really need that? But actually they bring something that you do need, even if you don't want it. And some of those people have been huge catalysts, actually. And look, with hindsight and looking back, there's some of the people that actually brought enough tension that the project actually had. So sometimes it can seem like it's the wrong people, but those people bring a tension with them that enables something that wouldn't have happened had they not come along. So that's from a very sort of spiritual perspective. From a really practical perspective, which of course is just as important, I think for me, I always say yes to conversations. So I never block a conversation. So if somebody wants to connect with me and says, I'm doing this, and this, if your first thought is, well, that's got absolutely nothing to do with what I'm doing, why would I need a conversation with that person? So I'm not going to bother. That's probably not the right thing. I will have conversations with really random people that don't seem to be really connected with what it is you're doing. And I often find that those are the people that I most need to make contact with. It's that openness to saying yes to possibility of what it is that people are bringing. And I would say, if I have to say, that's one of my biggest lessons, was learning that, actually. Because it was really easy to shut down conversations and think, well, that's not, I'm busy, I haven't got the bandwidth to talk about that, I haven't got the time to, be with that person. But actually, when you switch that around and think, I haven't got the time not to be with that person, because that person actually might be bringing something that I need, or that, when I say I'm talking about the organization, not me necessarily personally, but got something that we might need, and there might be some reciprocity that we can share there.
Yeah, beautiful. So to be open to it and allow it to flow, and to be open to be surprised as well along the journey.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank
Great
you.
summation.
The other thing that the circles around to, just when you're talking about that, is how I look at some organizations where they do that, where there's somebody in the organization that is open to whoever comes, is friendly, is kind. It comes back to the thing of kindness and kin again. And just simply because they're open and kind, there's a particular atmosphere that develops within the organization that is inviting. And there's a kind of a sense of welcome to people that come. And those are the organizations that do well, simply because they're nice to be in, and the people are nice to be around. And it actually is attractive, and it brings, so it doesn't even necessarily bring exactly what the organization needs. It just brings a sense of warmth and kindliness into the whole energy of the organization. And then those are the ones that seem to really flourish and do amazingly well. So, but I think we're saying the same thing in a slightly different way. Yeah. How about Elizabeth or Martha? Thanks, Sophia.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting. I think it addressed something that came to mind, like the usual feeling of fear of exposure, like to be receptive of ideas and the like. Like I was going to ask how that she addressed how to guard against negative energy that will be flooding to you, because by starting something you attract from all aspects of energies. So how best to guard against the negative energy that would probably like pull you down, or even discourage you, or even disqualify your passion, that they would even go to a point of asking, does this work? Do you think it's going to work? They have that nerve of just saying it and throwing it to your face, that do you really think this is going to work? Instead of just coming on board and bringing in something that will uplift you. So like that, in that way. Yeah.
Louise, would you like to answer? I will also, but we both can. So would you like to respond first, and then I'll come in with something as well?
Yes, so on a really practical, I think I'm a bit on the scale. I quite often don't I don't register. So I'm not very good at registering lots of different emotional overtones to things. So I I can actually be in a sense where somebody's quite cross with me or quite kind of, and I don't really notice. So unless they actually say I'm really cross with you, Louise, I kind of don't take it on board. So there is that part of my personality that I have to be honest about, in that I become quite focused on what it is that I'm doing. And that has its negatives as well as its positives for the people that work around me. So, you know, I'm going to be perfectly honest about that. But I would also say that there are people that will make things difficult for your journey. There are people who will, you know, tell you that this doesn't work, or, you know, this is all going to fail, this is not the right thing. And I think what I've learned over the years is to trust my intuition, because sometimes they're right. Okay, so sometimes they'll say, you know, I've had boards say to me in the past, Louise, that's never going to work in a million years. And, you know, I've had to really go back and ask myself, actually, do they know? And what I always listen to is my intuition, because sometimes my intuition will say, on paper, they might be right, but I know that's different. And so I think because I've got the skills, the rational skills, you know, I always will, I'll never dismiss what somebody says out of hand. I'll always go and I'll do the work. But if my intuition tells me that actually that is right, then I will continue. I'll give you a really interesting example of that. So, and this is going back to my corporate days, actually. It wasn't in the more recent things, but I had a CEO at the time. I was like the financial controller, and I did a series of cash flow things. And he said to me, that doesn't work. That will never work. That is, you know, it's basically just wrong. And I can remember sitting there and saying, and there was something inside of me that went, no, this is right. I know this is right. I just know. You know, so I said, I'll go away, I'll check the numbers, I'll check it out for you. Went away, checked the numbers, came back and said, no, this is right. And I think that takes a certain amount of courage in yourself to hold to your convictions, because we all know, and particularly as women, it's very easy to be told that you're not right, and that you know you're wrong, and that you've not got, you don't understand it, or to get talked over the top of, or all of those things. But I think it does require a little bit of courage when you do really feel that. And also I think then, and I will say this in all honesty too, sometimes I'm wrong. So, in fact, quite often I'm wrong. And it takes courage to say, you know what, I stuffed that up and I got that wrong. But I think for me, it's been about building trust. And this is where I come back to conditions, because if you build trust, quite often, even when you're wrong, people will still let it go, because they've seen you get it right enough times, that they kind of trust you enough to know that, you know, we all get it wrong. But maybe I've just been lucky, who knows? But, you know, I do think courage is a big thing. Courage in your own convictions, courage in your own intuition, and courage to actually say, yeah, I think I've got this, or courage to say, no, I didn't get this, and this is the reasons why.
And you know, I think what I wanted to say sort of leads on from that very much. It's sort of maybe the same thing in a slightly different format, is that I really do deeply kind of recognize that what happens externally in the world outside of us is always in some way a mirror of what it is that we are looking for or learning on some kind of a soul level deep inside. And I know that's a really maybe unpopular and un-PC thing to say. And you know, it sort of goes along with that awful thing about telling people that there's good that comes out of bad stuff. And that's a dreadful thing to say to somebody. Cheers, Sophia. Lovely to see you. Yeah. um, but there is something for me that if I'm getting negative feedback from other people, then very often it's really valuable for me to kind of look at where in myself am I not believing in myself. So it comes back to Louise's thing about having courage and having confidence. And as somebody who sometimes feels internally quite unconfident, I can sometimes find that other people reflect that to me in a way that makes me kind of question myself. But actually, what it's doing is it's helping me to question my own sense of kind of really needing to learn to stand in my own beliefs and trust myself as well. So so while it's tricky and I find it's so difficult to deal with when I get negative feedback from people, very often it's not so much that it's that I need to do something different as that I need to believe in myself a little bit more or something. And I think that's different for everybody, but it's just a thought as well. We've got a few minutes left just to check in with you, Elizabeth. Is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation?
I was just wanted to say that I've heard a lot of things that I didn't think resonated with me, and then it all just landed in my in my being to say that actually I have followed the paths that we've been chatting about this whole time. I also worked in corporate for 17 years and then took an absolute leap of faith and changed careers from corporate to being a doula. Never in my wildest dreams or in my soul or in my intuition did I believe that that was going to work. And then through just believing in myself constantly, just continue to follow that. And I have for the last 20 years. I never thought it was something I actually would ever do, but I did. And I'm, for not one single minute am I sorry that I took that change in my life path. And it was all just meant to happen at the right time. Now, where I am now I'm thinking of birthing new projects. And now I'm once again at a crossroads questioning whether these are the right projects to birth and how to, and finding the confidence to birth them. So I think for me, it's also, I think cycles in our lives also play a very big part in where we're at. I've entered a completely different cycle of my life now. And there's a lot of questioning going on. And is this the right thing? Is this not the right thing? So I think that also is another aspect, where we are with our children, our lives, our partners. I think that also makes a huge, big difference. And once again, it comes down to the kin, as you were saying earlier, the support that we have from those people and the people around us that can help us then move into the new avenues that we perhaps are exploring and thinking about.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I think that's so true. Different cycles of our life make such a big difference. And I also want to say as well, that things like education and the conditions for being able to actually bring your passion and purpose, depend a lot on the conditions that surround you. As if you're working 3 jobs just to, make ends meet, trying to find out what your passion and purpose is might not be top of your priorities list at that point in time. So, actually, it really depends on the conditions that we, and part of those conditions are which cycle of life you're in. Because, if you've got, small children, for example, you're really, consumed with that, or, you're caring for an elderly relative, or all of those different cycles of life that we all go through make a huge difference as to what it is we can actually do. So I think this is why for me the conditions are so important, because we may have these wonderful passions and purposes brewing and we may want to birth things, but the conditions might not be right. And I've met that in my own life the conditions not being the right conditions at that point, and you just, you know, that at that point it just has to pass you by, but it doesn't mean that the conditions might not change at some point in the future. And I love that you're at a threshold of a new way of what you might want to birth. I wish you many happy adventures with that.
Thank you.
We just have somebody joining us. Rebecca, hi. We have 1 minute left.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to see you. We're just
Yeah, nice to meet you too, Robyn.
we've just come to the end of the webinar, and we in our last minute before we close. So welcome. And
Oh, right. Okay, I didn't realize it
and
was going to be that short.
and
Next time.
yes, and we have recorded it, and so you're very
Oh,
welcome
great.
to listen to it on the
Oh, thank
recording as
you.
well. Okay. Okay, so thank you so much, Louise, for joining us. It was such a lovely conversation to be having, actually. I really enjoyed listening to all of your stories, and this kind of sense of being open to the possibilities of our soul kind of callings, just taking us this way or that way, and something about you make it sound as if it's simple, and I do think it's simple as well. So do you want to say anything to end, Louise, and then we will
Just I don't think
close it off.
it hasn't been that simple. It's probably what I was going to say. I think hindsight's a wonderful thing. I think when we're in the midst of things, they can feel very different. And when we tell stories, you know, from a kind of hindsight perspective. And also, I just want to thank all of the people that have been a part of those stories, because actually their roles were so important. I was a small player in a round of people that supported and actually made these dreams possible, exactly as in, you know, the Sacred Birth Center. The Sacred Birth Center would exist, you know, with all of the other people around it. I just coalesced bits of those people so that they could bring what it is that are their strengths. So yeah, it's been an absolute joy working with all of the people in the Sacred Birth Center and in all of the projects I've been involved in. Over many years. So big shout out to all of those people that made it happen.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. And maybe we see you another month again. Okay. Bye.
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 Good night.